perpendicular lines. We just got finished up with parallel lines. Let me turn my computer. There we go. Now we're going into perpendicular. So here's the Webster's dictionary definition of perpendicular lines. Two non-vertical lines that are on the same plane and have slopes that are negative reciprocal. So this word right here. Whoa, I didn't mean to cross it out. I meant to highlight it. Negative reciprocals. That means we are taking the slope and we are flipping it, because reciprocal is just a fancy word for flip. A negative means opposite sign. So I'm taking the opposite sign and flipping my slope. So if I give you an equation, for example, y equals 2x plus 3. What is the slope in that equation? It is the 2, right? The slope is 2. Well, if I'm asking for the negative reciprocal or the opposite reciprocal, I'm asking to flip this fraction. So under every whole number is a 1, and I'm asking you to flip the 2 to become 1 over 2. And since this is a positive 2, I'm going to take the opposite sign, so it's negative 1 over 2. So reciprocal means flip. That's what I'm doing right here. I'm flipping the 2. And opposite means I'm taking, or the negative means I'm taking the opposite sign. So, for example, if I give you a slope that is, let's erase this one, negative 3 over 4, my opposite reciprocal would say flip. So it becomes 4 over 3. And since it was negative, my new slope is now positive. Other examples include, and are not limited to, 1 over 3, flipping it, its opposite reciprocal becomes a negative 3 over 1. But we play varsity up in here, and we don't put ones underneath whole numbers when we write them. We can have, like I said before, a whole number such as 4. Remember, every whole number is over 1. So now our opposite reciprocal is negative 1 over 4. If we have a slope of negative 1, its opposite, this is a good one to have in your notes, its opposite reciprocal is positive 1. That's because there is underneath this a 1, and if I flip it, it's still 1 over 1, which is just 1. So it's kind of redundant to make 1 over 1 a fraction. And all of these are vice versa, which means I can go backwards. So the opposite reciprocal of negative 3 is 1 over 3. The opposite reciprocal of negative 1/4 is 4. The opposite reciprocal of 1 is negative 1. So those are just some examples of opposite reciprocals. So in the previous section in parallel lines, I had you identify the slope, and we used that slope in point slope form because parallel meant same exact slope. Perpendicular means I have to have the opposite or negative reciprocal slope so that my lines will intersect, and they will intersect and make a 90-degree angle. That's what's so beautiful about perpendicular lines. Every single time they intersect, they make a perfect T shape, and where they intersect is a 90-degree angle. So let's look at these 3 examples right here. Determine whether the lines are parallel or perpendicular. Determine which lines, if any, are parallel or perpendicular. So the first step is to always identify your slope. Let's write that on the side. Identify slope. That's how we're going to determine if these are parallel or perpendicular. We have to first find out what their slopes are so we can compare them. So in line A, lucky us, in line A, this is in what form? It is already in slope-intercept form, right? Which we love because graphing it makes it super easy. So slope-intercept form, check, it's done. Now I need to identify the slope. So the slope is always a number next to x, which in this case is what? 5. So let's write that down underneath. M equals 5. The slope equals 5. Well, let's take a look at line B. That's all I needed to do. Line B, is this in the correct form that we need it to be in? No, it's not. It's in standard form right now. X plus 5y equals 2. We need to get it in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to rewrite it, and I'm going to move some things around. What is the first thing I'm going to move? The x. I'm going to subtract it to the other side. So I'm left with 5y equals negative x plus 2. Now I'm going to divide every single term by 5. Don't skimp out and skip one of the terms. It's got to be even, right? It's got to be even. Just like, back in the day, my brother and I on Christmas, because that's what we celebrate, we used to count our presents and then made sure that they were all even, because if my brother got one more present than I did, all hell would break loose. So make sure that you treat each term in this very fairly and equally, or one of them will get mad, kind of like me and my brother. Totally off topic. I just like relating math to my personal life. And it's fun. All right, remember next to the x and in between this negative sign and this x, there's technically a 1 there. We just don't write it, again, because we played varsity up in here. So let's just write it so we remember, even though we played varsity, that this is a negative 1/5 x plus 2/5. Ooh, both fractions. That's okay. All we need to do is identify the slope. And the slope is negative 1/5, the number next to x. No x in our slope, right? We don't include it. It's just the number next to it. All right, again, this is in some type of standard form, just x and y's are all a little misplaced. I need to get it in slope-intercept form. First thing I gotta do is move the x. We like to move it, as the Madagascar movie would say. Let's move it. It's negative, I have to add it. Negative 10y equals positive 2x plus 0. We don't really need to write the 0, but just for everybody's sake, so they're understanding all these steps, I'm going to put that as a placeholder. Now we have to, what? Divide by 10. Remember, treat each term evenly or somebody's going to freak out. Each term gets divided by 10, so here it cancels out. Y equals 2 over negative 10. Can I simplify that? Yes, I can, to negative 1/5 x. 0 divided by negative 10, well, guess what? That's still a 0. Minus, plus, it don't matter. I could actually not even include it. And that will still be the same thing. So the slope of this equation is negative 1/5. So now I have to compare my red equation to my black equation to my green equation. Line A, line B, line C. So looking at this, do you see any that are parallel? If so, which ones? Line A, line B, or line C? Line B and C are parallel. Parallel symbols, the two parallel lines, they both have a slope of negative 1/5, which is exactly the same, therefore they are parallel. Do you see any slopes that are perpendicular? If so, which ones? Yes, line A and line B are perpendicular, and perpendicular is actually, the symbol is an upside down T, because it actually makes a little right angle box. We don't put the box, we just put an upside down T. And at the same time, line A and line C are perpendicular. Because they are flipping the fraction. So this 5, let's write it in red, this 5 flipped, because there's a 1 underneath it, becomes 1 over 5. And since it's positive, there's no sign in front, I'm going to tack on 11. So this is its opposite reciprocal, also known as its negative reciprocal. It doesn't matter if you use the word opposite or negative, it's tomato, tomato to me. All right, determine which lines, if any, are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. I'm actually going to skip this and drop down to here, because that was very similar, obviously, to the previous problem that we just did. Right here, it says write an equation of the line that passes through the point 4, -5, and is perpendicular to the line y equals 2x plus 3. So let's recall from writing parallel lines, we want our final answer to be in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept. Just a little star to remind. All right. Next, I want to identify the slope. Well, first I gotta see, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. First I want to see if it's in slope-intercept form. Let me make my little checklist over here. So is this equation in slope-intercept form? I look at it, I analyze it, I determine, heck yes, it is. Then I go to step 2, identify the slope. What is the slope in the equation given to me? Perfect, the m, or the slope, is 2. Because it wants one that's perpendicular, got to pay very close attention to these directions, I now need to, after I identify the slope, create the opposite reciprocal. Of the slope. So if my slope in the equation is 2, what is the opposite reciprocal going to be? I flip the 2 to be 1 over 2. It's positive, so I add a negative. This is the slope that is perpendicular to the given equation. That step is now complete. The third step on my checklist is now using point slope form. What is point slope form? It is y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. So I'm going to replace in here my slope, my new one that I found, my y point, and my x point. So I look back at my directions, I notice that I have an x and y right here, and my new m is right over here. So I'm going to fill in my blanks, y minus my y, which is a -5, equals my slope. Well, my perpendicular slope is -1/2. X minus my new x value, which is 4. My last step after I plug everything into point slope form is to simplify and solve. Let's write that. So I need to distribute -1/2 x to -4. So I remember I did say this in some of my classes. I don't know which group that I had that day. When you have a fraction, don't be afraid of it, especially the fraction half, 1 over 2, or -1 over 2, because all you have to use, instead of saying 1 over 2, replace that with the word half. It's much easier to solve problems like that. If I say, what's half of 10, you're quickly going to say 5. But if I say, what's 1 over 2 multiplied to 10, you might think about it for a second. So replace the word replace 1 over 2 with the word half. So if I multiply this in, I get negative half x. And now I look, what's half of negative 4? Well, half of negative 4 is going to be 2. The two negative signs cancel out, make it positive, and half of 4 is 2. Much easier to say that than what is 1 over 2 multiplied to 4. If you do need help, remember side work always matters. Multiply straight across, I get positive 4 over 2, which simplifies to 2. Now on the other side of my equal sign, these two negatives next to each other, they keep bumping into each other and they make a positive sign. I combine my like terms by subtracting this 5 over. So now I have y equals negative half x minus 3. So this equation is perpendicular to the equation they gave me, y equals 2x plus 3. So y equals 2x plus 3 is perpendicular to y equals negative half x minus 3. It just so happens that their y-intercepts are also the opposite sign. That doesn't always happen. I don't want to just make note of that. All that matters is that this and this are opposite reciprocals. All right, I want you to try. I'm going to bring down this list for you so we can, let's see, hold it down, click copy, let's move it. Oh, paste. Oh, it moved too far away. Let's move it for you. So you're going to try this one all by your lonesome and type in your final answer at the end. Same steps as before. Here's your checklist to go through it. I'll get you started by helping you find your perpendicular slope. So again, I see the word perpendicular in my directions. I'm given an equation in slope-intercept form, so I don't need to rearrange the equation into slope-intercept form. I'm identifying the slope as 4. So the opposite reciprocal would be negative 1 over 4. So this is my new slope that I'm putting into my equation. So steps 1 and 2 are done for you. You need to plug it into point slope form. I'll tell you right now, when you multiply that negative quarter in, or negative 1 over 4, it will cancel out to be a nice whole number. So you will not have a fraction or a decimal in your answer. So please type your final answer in the box provided.